Hey guys, James saying. So this is a video to clarify when you're doing mitral valve area calculation and why this area here on the screen, this is the gradient area. So let me go forward a couple. A lot of times it's shaded. So like this shaded area is the gradient area. And I occasionally will have a student ask me, okay, so you said, James, we are evaluating stenotic valves when the valves are open. Yes, that's true. And then the logic may go on to be something along, well, on the Wiggers diagram, you say the A wave is atrial contraction, the C wave is when the atrioventricular valves close, and they oftentimes will leave off the peak of the V wave is when the atrioventricular valves open. That's the key. So the question sometimes is, all right, so looking at this waveform here, this is the upstroke of the LV. This is the P wave on the QRS complex. You would come down, and if this, depending if this was a right atrial waveform, this would be about 80 milliseconds afterwards. If this was a wedge, the A wave would be about 240 milliseconds after the P wave. But regardless, the A wave is around the upstroke of the LV. This is the upstroke. This is the downstroke. The V wave is you can either think of it after the T wave or it's near the downstroke. Actually, the peak or the downstroke, the Y descent should match the downstroke of the LV. And so the question is, this is atrial contraction. So why are you not looking at some sort of gradient around this atrial contraction? Okay, so you have to remember that the atrial emptying is different than the right and left ventricle. So you may look at, like, if you're looking at a Wiggers diagram and you just want to start here, because that's where it starts, A wave, C wave, V wave. So yes, the ventricles, they contract in response to an electrical stimulus, and you have isovolumetric contraction, and then the valves open, the pulmonic and the aortic valve, and the blood is ejected out. And then when the pressure drops in the ventricles below the pressure where they pumped out their blood to, the the aortic valve and the pulmonic valve close. Well, now the atria, they work different. So here's you have to understand this part. So if you say, let's go to the beginning of when either the mitral valve or the tricuspid valve opens up, and it is here at the peak of the V wave. So that's when the mitral valve opens. So it's not that we're measuring stenosis during systole only. It's like when the valve is open, that's when we're seeing if it sticks. So the key part is right here at the peak of the V wave. That's when the AV, the atrioventricular valves, the mitral valve, and the tricuspid valve open, and the blood empties out. And as this continues, it picks back up over here, and 75% of the emptying of the atria occurs when the valve opens, and then the last 25% or so is ejected out when you have atrial contraction. So if you come to this Wiggers diagram and you say, well, this is the A wave, this is the atrial contracting, but let's get to the beginning when the valve should open up. As we follow up this LV pressure, it would go off the screen, come down here. And you can, some books will say the peak of the V wave is when the AV valves open, or the Y descent is when the AV valves open. So right here, where my cursor is, that's where the atrioventricular valves open, the mitral and the tricuspid. So this is where we start measuring for stenosis. Now, normally, this yellow line is LV. This, to me, it's red or orange. This is the, this looks like a wedge. As a matter of fact, this appears to be, so this is left atrial pulmonary wedge. This downstroke should match, this downstroke orange should match this yellow. That's what it's supposed to be. So we have, because the mitral valve won't open, there is delayed emptying, and therefore this orange line does not come down very quickly and match. This is the gradient area. So the valve is open here. We come along as the pressure starts to go up. This is the beginning of the A wave. This is the mitral and the tricuspid valve are contracting. And then after the blood is emptied out and the pressure in the atria becomes lower than the pressure in the ventricles, the atrioventricular valves close. So right here near the end of the A wave, that's when the atrioventricular valves close. So that's when the atrioventricular valves open, and this is when the atrioventricular valves close. So this is the period of time that the valve is open, and you can tell if it's sticking because of this pressure gradient. And this is a nice little heart that I found over here to help visualize. So let me just stop this for a minute here and say, actually, let's get over to, right now we are in isovolumetric contraction, but let's get over to the peak of the V wave. This is when the atrioventricular valves open. So let me just play this forward a little bit. Step forward. All right, so right now we are in isovolumetric relaxation. If we look on this waveform, we're in isovolumetric relaxation. When we get to the peak of the V wave, or the Y descent, the downstroke, that's where the atrioventricular valves open. So we're not quite there yet, so let's go over a little more. Boom, now we just passed, let me back up one. We're at the peak of the V wave. The atrioventricular valves open, the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve, and blood from the atria is passively emptying into the ventricles. So this is the beginning of the period of time that the atrioventricular valves are open, and that's why this is, if there's a pressure gradient, this is where we start looking. Then as we continue along, the ventricles continue to empty out here on this. The atria continue to empty out as we look along on this screen. And then we finally get to, oh, it started on its own. Let me get over here and make it stop. Back up a little bit. So now we're getting into atrial contraction, and it shows these little arrows. Let me step forward. Of the atria squeezing. This is the atrial contraction. And then when the atrioventricular valves close, boom, this is the beginning of systole. This is isovolumetric contraction. So that's the end of the period of time that the mitral and the tricuspid valve are open. So it is this area here. And it's usually when the computer does it for you. Let me hop up a couple of slides. It will shade it for you. This is the upstroke of the LV, the downstroke of the LV, the A wave, the V wave, and this is the gradient area. So that's the why of that part of the waveform. But I like the way the student's mind works when they say, hey, why is that the gradient area when atrial contraction is here? Because actually atrial contraction is near the end of the atrial systole period, which is taking place during ventricular diastole. So I hope that clears that up as to why this is the gradient area. And I'll leave a link up here on the screen for a playlist on various waveforms and various RCIS hemodynamic calculations, and in the playlist, part of it is the mitral valve area for the Gorlin formula, because this gradient, you take the mean gradient, that plays a key part in calculating the valve area, because when you're calculating the valve area, it's for mitral stenosis, or you can do it for any valve. But is it so critical that we're contributing to the diagnostic information of saying the valve is critically, it doesn't open up enough, and you do need surgery or you don't need surgery? All right, guys, I hope this helps. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. It would help my channel. And if you found the information helpful or useful, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, remember to turn on notifications so that you don't miss when the next video comes out. All right, guys, thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next video.